Okay, good morning, everyone. While people are still coming in, I'd slowly like to start this second session of the morning entitled Bridging the Energy Divide, Global Collaboration for an Inclusive Transition. And I am really happy about people coming in, starting to introduce this session. Good morning again, everyone. So let me maybe make a bit of a transition in this transition panel to our last panel and try to already summarize some of the notions that I at least heard in the panel before. First of all, there seems to be a high sense of urgency, but at the same time, hope that together things can be put on the right path. We've also heard that all actors need to play a role in this transition. And there was quite a debate whether the private sector plays, or what kind of role the private sector will play, so I'm definitely going to ask more questions on this. But we've also heard that states play a role, and of course the civil society. And one strong point I think that was made also in the beginning of today's discussions was that a shared vision is needed in order to bridge these divides and come to joint solutions. So with that, I'd like to introduce this panel. Again, we're here on the panel, Bridging the Energy Divide, Global Collaboration for an Inclusive Transition. My name is Katrin Lorenz. I'm GIZ Country Director here in Morocco. GIZ has been a partner with the Paris Peace Forum for the past 5 years, so I'm really happy to also continue this partnership from this perspective here in Morocco. Our panel will talk about a lot of very important issues taking up the discussion we had before. We will speak about, of course, the relationship Global North, Global South, the energy security, looking at energy basic needs, of course, decarbonization, but also we speak about technology, innovation, partnerships, and investment. And Morocco is definitely a great place for this discussion, because here, in particular on the campus of UNCSP, we unite many of the pioneering aspects of Morocco's role in this debate. I'd like to introduce my panel. I have here with me, probably doesn't need much introduction, Angel Guerrilla, who is now the president of the Paris Peace Forum and of course had been the Secretary General of OECD for many years. I also have with me Amadou Hott, who is the special envoy of the president of the African Development Bank. He used to be vice president on AFDB's Power, Energy and Climate Change division. He also served in Senegal, his home country, as a public servant in many high-ranking positions and has experience in investment banking. Next with me is Mayumi Endo. She is currently the deputy director of the Development Cooperation Directorate at OECD in Paris. She has extensive experience in development, working with JICA and long-time field positions in senior management in the Philippines, Bangladesh, and Turkey. Also next, I have with me on this panel Nicolas Lefebvre-Martin. He works with NG. You probably tell us a little bit more about NG, which is a multinational corporation working in the energy sector, but he also brings experiences from working with McKinsey and the International Energy Agency. And of course, last but not least, I have Noufal Mader, who is a representative of the OCP group. He has over 15 years of experience in the oil and gas sector, and now he's the vice president of OECP's Climate Action and Decarbonization Division. So with that, I'd like to kick off, and we see that the seats are filling. So let's start our discussion. Angel, we're here in Morocco talking about the issue of energy divide, energy transition. So what's your first take observation on this issue that you'd like to share with the audience this morning?
Thank you very much. Let me say that I would like to focus on a solution which the Kingdom of Morocco is already seriously investigating, and that is the hydrogen revolution. Now, here's some good news for the audience, because I assume that most of the audience is Moroccan, Um, of all the countries in the world, and we include Patagonia, where Chile can produce electricity rather inexpensively, Eastern Canada, again, the one country that clearly has an advantage over most others is Morocco. Now, why? Well, because Morocco has plenty of sun, like many of its neighbors. But it also has a lot of wind. And electrolyzers, which are the ones that who break up the molecule and produce hydrogen, electrolyzers work better if they have a steady flow that's not peaks up and down, because it works very well during the day, and then you have the solar. No, here you can have the solar, and you can have in the evening, you can have the wind with the fuel cells, and it can continue to produce electricity. Now, let me just tell you, because 75% of the cost of producing hydrogen is the input cost of electricity. So, the country that can produce electricity at a lower cost becomes much more competitive. And also because it is cradled here in the Mediterranean, and it has a number of markets here. So now, let me just say, Morocco has already decided with the Offre Maroc, the Maroc offer. It has already established the rules, at least the initial rules, with which to organize this hydrogen revolution. Now, the IRENA, the International Renewable Energy Agency, has concluded that Morocco will have the third lowest green energy production costs behind China and Chile, and ahead of Australia, Mexico, India, and the USA. So, again, a different source confirms the fact that Morocco can be extremely competitive when producing electricity. It has all the water that you need to electrolyze in the Atlas Mountains. It has sun, it has the wind to run the electrolyzers, it can also, because some people don't know this, Morocco presently imports 68% for its electrical systems, imports oil, that means fossil fuels. It can do away with all of that. Imagine that no need to import the oil, because it would then have hydrogen as an effective substitute. So again, I think it's quite important. Let me say also something else. Every time a kilogram of hydrogen is consumed in a fuel cell, it produces 9 gallons of pure water. What is, I just mentioned, sécheresse, you know, in my opening speech. 6 years of drought. So the fact that you can solve the energy problem, but also solve also the water problem, well, what an advantage. So let me just say, as the former head of the OECD, it would be my honor and president of the Paris Peace Forum to introduce my friends in Morocco here to all the people who can literally draft the mechanics by which this incredible vision for Morocco could become real. Thank you.
Thank you. Coming back to urgency and hope, it's great that you start with a solution already on this second panel, and it's very much PPF-alike for those who've been following the Paris Peace Forum. It's all about solutions. So the advantages of a place like Morocco for renewable energy innovation are clear. It will need also investment, I'm sure, to bring this about. And we also heard from Mo Ibrahim before, well, a big obstacle or challenge is that the cost of capital in Africa is too high. So with these things in mind, Amadou, how is the African Development Bank looking on the potentials, but also the challenges in particular when it comes to investments? And what are your experiences with building partnerships such as the Alliance for Green Infrastructure and with innovative financing in order to make these solutions become even clearer and come into action? Amadou, please.
Thank you very much. I think it's extremely important that we strive to attract the private sector capital in Africa, in particular in green infrastructure. I'm partially agreeing with Chairman Mo when he's a little bit pessimistic about the private sector flowing massively into Africa. Massively, it will take a lot of time before we get there because of the reasons that he mentioned. Cost of capital is too high, a lack of bankable projects, perception of risk as well, which is a very big issue. I was in Saudi 3 weeks ago when I mentioned that according to Moody's, project defaults in Africa represent only 1.9%, whereas in North America it's more than 6%, in Latin America more than 10%, in Western Europe more than 4%, and Africa was the lowest actually. People were shocked in the room. They didn't know that these were the hard figures, these were the statistics, this is not invented by Africans, it's Moody's that put it out there. So it's very important that the perception of risk be actually addressed and the Africa risk premium as well be addressed if we are to attract not only investors investing in Africa's Euro bonds, for example, when governments issue bonds to invest in infrastructure, but also for the private sector to come in. Because if the risk premium is there, both investors investing in African issued papers will demand a higher return, but also private sector moving in will actually demand a higher IRR as well. And that's why actually the international community, through partnerships, we should work to address that. One example, one African country having a same rating than a country in another region. We see the African countries paying 200 basis points to 500 basis points more. You take, for example, Iraq and Nigeria. They have exactly the same rating, but Nigeria pays 500 basis points more meaning that if Iraq pays 5% when they issue bond raising money on the international market, Nigeria would pay 10%. And 5% on a $1 billion transaction for 20 years, it's $1 billion of extra cost that Nigeria, for example, would pay compared to Iraq. So that's a very big issue. Not only the ratings should be sort of revisited, but once we have the same rating, we still pay more because investors price the African risk higher despite the same rating. So this is one point. At the African Development Bank, what we are trying to do, in particular for green infrastructure, is to address the lack of bankability of projects into the infrastructure space. Because a lot of money is out there looking for assets to invest in, but they're not meeting. Why? Because we are not bringing to market rapidly enough bankable projects. That's why we are setting up a $100 million project preparation facility. This is grant money that we provide to the public sector, to government, state-owned enterprises, to do the pre-feasibility studies, to come up with the planning so that we can identify a list of projects in the green infrastructure space. And once you have the list of projects, you need to spend money to make those projects bankable. It's very expensive. You can spend 3 million, 4 million doing all your studies, and then the project does not happen, you lose your 4 million. So we are saying at the African Development Bank, one institution cannot do it alone. We have to work in partnership. So our alliance is composed of the African Development Bank that is putting in $40 million out of the 500 that we are trying to raise. That will generate a pipeline of $10 billion of project. But we have other DFIs. We have also G7 countries investing into this alliance. I was at the finance ministers meeting 3 weeks ago in Italy, where the G7 countries pledged to invest $150 million into this alliance to allow us together to raise the 500 for the 10 billion. What we are looking for here is $10 billion of private sector investments. The members of the alliance, which include, by the way, philanthropies, which include as well other MDBs, is aiming to develop those projects so that the private sector can invest. I will finish by saying that the role of the public sector is critical. Chairman Moore said it. We need to increase our domestic resource mobilization, fight illicit financial flow, but also stop giving tax incentives. Nobody gives tax incentive anymore, which is true. And if we do all of that, we increase our tax to GDP rate. Today, it's about 14% in Africa. In developed countries, it's 40%, 45%. If you have a higher tax to GDP, I'm not saying that tax more the same people. You need to widen your tax base, making sure that the government is getting returns and value out of its assets. It's not giving away its assets, whether it's land, minerals, whether it's whatever, oil and gas. You have to extract as much value as you can. When you do that, your rating improves. When your rating improves, even if you're not getting all the drop in cost, you'll get some, which means then you can borrow more, because for a long run, infrastructure would have to be delivered by governments. We cannot shift it to the private sector. The private sector can do maybe 20%, 30%, but the majority should be done by the governments that needs to raise money. That money has to be cheap. It has to come from MDBs, but also it has to come from the market. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So this theme of stopping to give tax incentives probably will be brought up again during the day, I would assume, and it also describes really well, as you have, the role of the public sector, and I think it also describes really well the relationship north and south and the conditions that both sides put on this relationship. So with that, I'd like to turn to Nofal, and that he shares from the point of view of the OCP, first of all, also this question of North-South relationships in tackling the energy divide. What is your take on this? What's the experiences of OCP as an African actor? And then also coming back to solutions, as we started this session, the experience of OCP with the circular economy approach seems to be already part of solutions in this debate, so please share some insights on that as well.
Okay. Well, thank you for having me. First, what is a circular economy, as you said? It's about preservation of resources, responsible production, responsible consumption, and the resource and waste valorization. So basically, that's the 4 pillars. So it's in the interest of everyone, global south, global north, to integrate these sustainable practices into this energy transition. Transition will happen, but how to do it sustainably, with the respect to the environment, with the preservation of the resources, and not leaving anyone behind, and doing it in a fairest way. So developing, should be taken, this sustainable integration of sustainable practice integration should be taken as an opportunity. It's an opportunity for developing countries or the global north to deploy its technology, to deploy the financing, to deploy the R&D, and to create value through that. It's also an opportunity for the global south to jump into this energy transition without and get away from this fossil fuel dependency, because this we see that this climate change problems are depend on every country. Some countries are hit with drought, some countries are hit with floods, etc. So it's a basis, it's a regional problems, but that needs a global answer. On top of that, what we can say this transition, if we are damned if you do it, but we are damned even more if we don't do it. Because if we do it, it costs money. So we need to find a way how to finance that through some people need defend incentives, some others defend the taxes, or we have a way, today it's not yet economical, so we have a way through regulations. We have to find a way how to make it economical, waiting for the technology and innovation to make it cost effective as it is anticipated in 20 years, 30 years, etc. So the cost of inaction is even higher. That's why I say if we don't do it, the cost of inaction is much higher. It's today only the carbon mechanism is more, or carbon taxes, avoidances, etc., are representing more than 5% of global valorization of companies. Those carbon issues represents as a risk 10 to 40% of the company's EBITDA today. When we look at the cost of carbon today, which is at least $200 per ton. OCP, what we are doing as OCP, we take it really seriously and we take it as an opportunity, as I said. It's an opportunity for deploying technology and deploying and getting away from these drawbacks and risks related to fossil fuel dependency. So today already 87% of our electricity is coming from clean sources, either cogeneration or power purchase agreement from wind energy, etc. From now to 2027, we are deploying a $2.3 billion US dollars capex for building an extra 1.2 gigawatt of renewable to cover all our needs. So to go from 87% to 100% of our electricity coming from clean sources, including the increase of capacity, almost doubling our production that is anticipated for 2030. So basically, that's all the efforts we are doing. We are doing on many other sustainable parts that may be on water preservation, on desalination, wastewater treatment, etc. But we are putting a big focus with the 13 billion US dollar global investment budget for energy transition through renewables, but also through hydrogen, green ammonia production, and we have committed for 1 million ton by 2027 and 1 million and 3 million tons of green ammonia by 2032. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. That's impressive, and I also like the cost of inaction is much higher, and figures always show that, but still, it seems sometimes difficult to come into action. And you also said you take this opportunity, of course, that technology and innovation, technology development gives in order to move forward in a concrete manner. So with that, I'd like to move over to Nicolas. Maybe you can tell us a little bit about NG, what you're doing, and also share some of the insights you have, first of all, on technology and the energy transition, but maybe also if you have some words to say about the role of the private sector as a main actor in this debate, we're also happy to hear your insights. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Pleasure to be here. So maybe just a few words about NG for those who don't know. So NG is an international energy transition utility and an integrated international energy transition utility. All these words matter. So international, we operate in 30 plus countries. Integrated because we really work on pretty much all the levers of the energy transition. And I'll get to that in a second. Energy transition, because this is at the heart of our mission. The bylaws of NG, the mission statement, is to accelerate the energy transition towards a decarbonized economy. So it's really what we do. It guides pretty much all our investments, all of our actions. And a utility, because there's a very strong sense of public service in the work that we do, in the energy we generate, in the services we provide in the countries that we operate. Just to give you an order of magnitude, it's around 90,000 people, 80 billions in revenues, if that rings a bell for some. And we are, again, active across the energy transition levers. So in renewables, we have around 40 gigawatts in operation. We install roughly 4 gigawatts a year across the world. So really that makes us one of the leading players in renewable energy. We're number 1 in district cooling systems around the world, number 3 in heating networks. We have a very strong ambition in hydrogen as well, to have 4 gigawatts installed by 2035. Very active in the battery space to complement the renewables with an objective of having 10 gigawatts of batteries installed by 2030. Active in biomethane, and I could go on, desal. So we're really this integrated player in the energy transition. So this gives us, to some extent, a really quite unique lens across technologies, per your question, but also around, and I think this was one of the points raised before, what are the right conditions for the private sector to invest? And we almost take it as a mission to accompany governments in the countries where we operate, to partner with them, to help them bring some of the best practices and set the right conditions to increase the investment so that companies like us can go and invest in these countries. I should say that those 30 countries are around the world. So we operate in Chile, notably, you mentioned before, in Peru and Brazil, of course in North America. We operate in Morocco. We're very proud to be present here and working closely to enhance our activity here, because I think Angel, you pointed rightly that Morocco is putting the right conditions for an acceleration, and so we're very pleased to be here. We're in Egypt as well, in South Africa, and in the Middle East, in Saudi, in Dubai, and in other places, and of course also in Asia. And I think it's through that lens that we can help governments. But I think we should just really, and I think Mamadou, you mentioned this, but really emphasize the fact and the importance of the right regulatory context for companies to work. So the connection between private and the public sphere is critical. You would be surprised at the amount of time that I spend really analyzing every country we operate in. Are the conditions right for us to continue to expand on projects, for us to accelerate, for us to shift? What are the risks upcoming? And this is not a problem of emerging economies only. It certainly is of Western countries as well. You saw the European elections just yesterday. That will have an impact. And the elections in Mexico recently, that will have an impact. So all of these components really influence how the energy transition can fare. And what we're looking for when we invest is countries which have a strong track record of providing the right context for private sector investments. We look for countries which have the right vision for the energy transition. And we look for, of course, the right support mechanisms in place for us to be able to expand our capital in the countries. When you think of wind farms, take the wind farms that were in construction right now in Egypt, for example, which is a 500 megawatt onshore wind farm, which will be, I think, the largest in the continent. That's a 25-year investment. So it's really critical for us to have that stability and that long-term foresight. Maybe one last point to answer your question around technologies. I mean, we're very bullish in the availability of technologies today to really go very far. I don't think we need to wait for breakthroughs to come out of research labs for us to make progress. And that is true both for electrons, very true for electrons, where wind and solar are now very cost competitive. It is also true for batteries, which are increasingly competitive, but I think it is increasingly true for molecules, which will be very important. You mentioned hydrogen, but also for biomethane. So we are very confident that the energy transition is in good track and that it is doable. It can be done in a way which is affordable. It shouldn't necessarily be a very high cost point.
Thank you very much, and again giving hope that this ecosystem presented here on the panel helps moving into the right direction, and the OECD, of course, plays a very important role in all this. So I'd like to turn to Mayumi and ask, so what are lessons learned in practice from partnerships for energy transition that you have had in your career? Maybe you can share some of the insights. And also share with us what is OECD currently working on in order to provide regulation, collection of best practices, and its narrative around these issues for the future.
Thank you, Catherine, for those questions. Let me start with your first question in terms of partnership. So I'd like to start by sharing my experience in Bangladesh, where I worked and lived 15 years ago as a representative of JICA. JICA is a Japanese government's development agency, for those of you who don't know. And at that time, Bangladesh economy was booming and energy demand was soaring, and we were going through severe electricity crisis. Even in the area where I lived, which was the center of Dhaka, which is the capital, experienced 10 to 12 hours of blackouts every day, and using the generators was the norm. And most of the large garment factories, which are the drivers of Bangladeshi economy, were using diesel-powered generators full-time or 24/7 because the garment processing was so sensitive to electricity disruptions. And this was, of course, adding to the CO2 emissions. So under such environment, naturally, for JICA, it was a priority to support Bangladesh's energy sector, and we supported several power plants, mainly run by oil. And the last project I was involved in was to build 1,200 megawatt ultra supercritical coal-fired power plant. And it sounds outrageous now that for a bilateral donor to support building a coal-fired power plant, but at that time, it seemed like it was the only option that we had to provide affordable, reliable, stable, universal energy to a very poor country like Bangladesh, where 160 million people lived. So fast forward 2024, things are much different, and because global problems need global solutions, development partners formed a coalition to support Bangladesh's green transition. And late last year, they have launched Bangladesh Climate and Development Platform to mobilize adaptation and mitigation investments. And maybe your company, ENGIE, is also involved, but the IMF, the entire World Bank family, AIIB, ADB, AFD, European Union, EIB, all forming as Team Europe, And the Green Climate Fund, UK, Korean government, and JICA, they all joined forces to build Bangladesh's clean energy, to support Bangladesh's clean energy transition. And it provides financing, including 1.85 billion US dollar policy-based lending, 600 million US dollar of blended financing, establishes a project preparation facility to improve the bankability of the projects, capacity building to the government, and also promotes reforms to create enabling environment that will help attract additional private financing. And this, I think this point has been highlighted by the previous speakers. And we believe this approach incorporates several key elements for success, which are, one, it's based on a strong country ownership, building on effective dialogue, and two, tailored to its specific needs and context, and three, it builds on comprehensive, coherent, and coordinated long-term commitment by the international community, and four, focus on mobilization of private sector financing. And these are all important elements, and I think this is the way forward for building partnerships. And so on your second question, what is OECD doing? And as you know, OECD, one of our important roles is to collect data, analyze them, and make policy recommendations. And our job is to help countries around the world build better policies for better lives. And we use every opportunity to influence and to address energy divide and green transition. COP is the natural place to do so. And for example, in November 2019 at COP25, under the leadership of Mr. Gurria, the OECD published a report called The Only Way Forward, proposing a set of recommendations for donors to align their assistance with Paris Agreement. It was considered to be bold at that time, but I think we were going ahead of the curve. 2 years later, again during the COP, this time the OECD Development Assistance Committee announced a declaration to align their ODA with the objectives of the Paris Agreement and made commitments to make progress towards net zero, partnering with different stakeholders. One of the focus areas was on financing, and we are now exploring ways in which innovative instruments such as green, social, sustainability-linked bonds can mobilize private finance. We're also contributing to Cold Transition Accelerator initiative that was launched by President Macron and the US Special Presidential Envoy for Climate, John Kerry, at the COP last year. And we're aiming to launch the OECD guidance for credible coal policies in time for COP this year. Finally, this year, in our latest edition of our flagship report called Development Cooperation Report, under the working title of Poverty and Inequality Reduction Amidst Green Transition, we'll be raising awareness to the risks and opportunities posed by transition process for poverty and inequality reduction. We're launching this report on July 17 during this year's UN High-Level Political Forum, and its key message will feed into relevant discussions in the global forum, for example, G20, COP29, and also the UN Summit of the Future. And the report highlights the importance of development cooperation actors to support partner countries in anticipating and mitigating the negative impacts of green transitions while maximizing their positive outcomes. Every transition has winners and losers, and we need to support the losers, especially if they're coming from disadvantaged, marginalized, or vulnerable groups. We need to pay attention to different contexts, enable meaningful participation of local communities, and target groups at particular risk of being left behind. For example, informal workers, women, indigenous people and communities, and also groups facing energy poverty. And also at the same time, we need to support policies and investments that contribute to universal access to affordable, reliable, sustainable energy services and technologies, which is really, really crucial. And we believe that development cooperation has an important role to play. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And Thanks so much, Mayumi, for sharing what's concretely on the agenda of OECD until the end of this year. We have very little time left, and I see there's a large consensus on this podium anyhow, so maybe I just move backwards. Mayumi, you had a chance to already share OECD flagship report. I'm sure many in this room will be waiting keenly for this to come out, so I'll go backwards, so everybody except for Nicola has a moment to think about my question. So, Nicola, what's on your agenda? So we all have a consensus. The urgency is there. There is a shared understanding. Things need to be done. Costs are higher in inaction. What's concretely the next thing ENGIE is doing until the end of the year? A new initiative, something new to start, a new technology innovation that you would like to boost. So what's your next for you relevant thing in order to move into the right direction and play your role as actor in the ecosystem to take a part also in moving the system forwards into the right direction?
Yeah, it's a good question. Our focus is very much on accelerating. So anything we can do to accelerate, we try to do it in the countries where we work. So I don't think there's something new. In fact, it's continuing to do and really continuing to work with the countries we're in, on the technologies we're in. I think we've got a very solid roadmap around these technologies, whether it be renewables, whether it be hydrogen, whether it be biomethane, and so on. So I think it's really around just continuing to deliver and working with governments. And frankly, these types of forums are very useful way for us to exchange and to find the right solutions.
Thank you very much. I'll go over to Nufal from OCP. What's your next big thing that you think this is what we have to do this year? It'll make a difference.
Well, what we have to do this year and next year's, I think transition needs three main things. So regulations and policies that will mean that needs financing and needs partnerships. So we're working on governments and supporting Moroccan NDC and committing for carbon neutrality on our scope 1 and 2 by 2030, on our 3 scopes by 2040, and working on helping on many discussions with authorities or international organizations, etc. On investing, we are deploying a $13 billion investment that's huge to the scale of the global south and to our company to produce 560 million cubic meter of non-conventional water, of 5 gigawatt of renewables, 1 million ton of green ammonia, etc. On the partnerships, also we are for partnerships you need that's what you need to share risks. So for that, you need, you can do partnerships only with the willing people. So you need to have inspired leaders, and hopefully that's what we have. But also we are trying to work with all companies and multinationals with goodwill to support this transition, to accelerate the investment that we need for this transition to happen. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We'll be definitely looking into these 3 themes that OECD is pursuing, regulation, finance, and partnerships. So AFDB, we've heard already impressingly about the alliance, but maybe if you'd like to add something, Amadou, or that seems to you in particular important under also the theme of Global South, Global North cooperation.
Thank you very much. Our key objective this year is by September to close the fund that we are raising for the Alliance for Green Infrastructure in Africa, $300 million. It will be the largest project preparation and project development facility ever dedicated to infrastructure in Africa. So this is one, we are doing it in partnership with the North as well. So South companies, institutions putting money next to Northern institutions and governments as well. So this is one. Number 2, the bank is trying also to push partners to reallocate SDRs to MDBs. The IMF approved that method for up to $20 billion. Remember, one SDR transferred to MDBs is equivalent to 4 SDRs basically that we can on lend to countries at a much lower cost. We're hoping that many countries will join us this year on that. And number 3, we have launched this partnership with the World Bank to help 300 million Africans access electricity by 2030. And the teams are already working on this, and next year we'll organize a big energy summit in Africa dedicated to this initiative, and a lot of that will go into renewable energies, but also we're pushing for private sector money going into infrastructure, even if it is very difficult. And the bank has a goal for the next 10 years to multiply by 2 or 3 the amount of money it is investing into infrastructure with the private sector. Today, our portfolio, we have about 20% dedicated to the private sector and 80% dedicated to the public sector, but our goal is to increase drastically the private sector support that we are providing in the future. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. So finally, let's look again at the Paris Peace Forum, Angel. So I know many initiatives on the way. We also have the PPF, of course, the big conference still ahead of us this year in November. So what's the next big thing to continue this conversation from the side of the PPF?
Globally, we must unhook ourselves from the fossil fuel system, from high-capacity transmission lines. You know, we have to go to microgrids. This, by the way, applies to Morocco. We have to democratize the energy of the future to deal with the global south and north divide. Now, why else do we can produce at $1.5 in California what we're selling at the pump at $36, okay? Now, why? Well, as the chairman of this particular company said, because people are willing to pay for it. Well, yes, but people are bleeding for it, you know? So it's not just that they're willing to pay for it, it's just that they need it so badly that they're willing to pay for it, yes. But remember, all that is necessary for evil to triumph is that good men shall do nothing. That this is a phrase by Edmund Burke. So, will we continue to do nothing?
In any case, all these initiatives that we've heard about that will take place still this year, I think show that a lot is done. And the theme here about stronger collaboration, bringing the ecosystem together, I think was a great start. I hope you all on the panel will continue exchanging on the different initiatives that are taking place still this year. And with that, I'd like to close this session. Thank you very much to the organizers. Thanks a lot to the distinguished panel. Thanks for your attention. And I think it's over to lunch, maybe, or not yet.